What's up, chess player? How often does it happen to you that you have the initiative, you control the center, everything seems to be perfect, and then you lose it completely, you just spoil the entire advantage and you even lose the game? Man, thank God in this game I have won in the end in the incredible endgame, but during the game it was a huge roller coaster. The last round of an incredibly painful tournament for me, Pardubice Open, that was one of the most painful experiences in the entire career for me. So this game, at least the last round, I mean, if you win it, you at least have some good memories because what happens last, you remember the most. So d4, knight f6, that was the Benoni defense. And let's see how I managed to get a very good position out of it. That should be very useful for you. So takes, d6, the starting position. And well, if you have a chance to control the center, of course you should take it. You shouldn't say that, well, you're a good guy. I don't need any gifts from you, so I'm not going to control the center. No, chess is a very brutal game. If you get a chance to get the initiative, you must do it. Otherwise, well, you lose. As a first world chess champion, Wilhelm Steinitz said, if you have the initiative, you must use it. Otherwise, you're going to lose it. Here it's a pretty tricky moment. If you play the move bishop g7 as black, then after queen a4 check, there might be some tactical problems for you because of the weakness of the move of the pawn d6. So my opponent apparently knew that, and she played a6. By the way, a very good player from Czech Republic. She has around 2100, but played very strong here. e3, castles, h3, a very important move because I want to save this bishop. z1 is a very important bishop to attack the d6 pawn. So in case of knight h5, which happened, I want to have some square to secure my bishop here. So queen e7, bishop e2, knight e7, everything completely normal. Now knight h5 happens and f5. I mean, that is not a big problem for me because I'm not afraid of f4. I'm gonna just play e4 or maybe even take it, depending on what's gonna happen on the board. But taking here, of course, would lead to knight going to f4, and you should be very careful with that. So I'm going with one of the most reasonable maneuvers in the Benoni defense for white. Once you exchange this pawn, you have this pawn, you have this square on c4, and that is a perfect square for your knight because not only it's controlling everything here and in the center, it's also putting so much pressure on this d6 pawn. So my opponent just went back all the way to e8 to protect the d6 pawn, and here I felt that I'm in total control of the position, and well, I just need to find a way to continue. I mean, you can enjoy your position all day long, but you need to win somehow, right? So I played queen b3. I just wanted to develop all of the pieces. Here a good example, by the way. I don't want to exchange the knights because my knight is better than my opponent's knight. And in general, my opponent has some difficulties in terms of pieces development. She doesn't have enough space for all of the pieces. So if you allow your opponent to exchange the pieces, you're making the task much simpler. So that is not what I want to do. I want to bring my knight to b6 instead. And eventually my idea was to play the move f4 one day, which is a very controversial move. You're gonna see later why. So rook e1, I'm about to start my attack here in the center. That was my plan. Knight f6, and here is this moment. My opponent, when we analyze the game afterwards, immediately said that this was my biggest mistake, and well, afterwards, of course, I agree with her, but during the game, it felt a very logical move for me because I wanted to play e4 afterwards, yeah, bishop f3 or d3, e4, open up the entire e-file and just crush my opponent because I have a better development and I have more space. But the problem is it's a very responsible positional decision because my bishop is basically in prison now. If I don't manage to open up with e4 and f5, then my bishop stays there forever, and that's gonna be a very, very big attitude to this bishop. So, and that is exactly what happened in the game. But why I made the move f4, you would ask? Because, well, I'm not that bad in terms of positional principles. In this case, I was a victim of the computer analysis because I was preparing this variation just refreshing my mind, and computer was suggesting the move f4 so often in very different situations. I was completely sure it's a good move in this type of structures. But In this position particularly, it just doesn't work because I'm not in time to play e4 and my opponent lands a knight there, and once the knight is there, you can see immediately that the bishop is so horrible and the entire plan failed because also the e3 pawn is very weak. So yeah, that was a very, very bad decision. So don't do that. If you're preparing some computer variations and you know some idea, remember to check the particular circumstances you have on your board, because sometimes it might work, but sometimes it doesn't. That is why chess is such a complex game. So knight went to d7. Once again, I don't want to exchange it. And yeah, you could see that the computer says e4 might have been a better option, not to allow my opponent just to, attack me and get the entire counterplay, because the problem with the move knight to c4 is that my opponent plays b5 immediately, and that is once again this counterplay that I missed, the mistake I make so often that I miss my opponent's counterplay. The problem is I can grab a pawn, but who cares about the pawn? It's all about this knight on e4, and even though you can see that's not the best move objectively, it's good enough. I mean, it's strong enough and it's painful enough, because now this bishop is strong, now this knight is just such a monster, and I also have this annoying pin. I mean, everything went the wrong way. Just a few moves ago, I was controlling everything on the board, I was having the initiative, now I'm a pawn up, but this pawn doesn't bring me any happiness at all. So knight a5, well, I need to still continue creating some threats. I was very desperate in this moment. I was thinking that, well, I have messed up everything, and that is so pity. But I still need to continue find some resources. You remember that in the end of the day, I somehow managed to win this game, which at this moment seems completely incredible. I thought that, well, I'm losing the entire tournament, everything is so bad, and now the last round, it's also going the wrong way. Queen c2, I so desperately wanted to go back from this diagonal, from this b file, because this pin is incredibly annoying for me. Bishop a6, and now knight c3 back. Well, I'm ready to give up the pawn back, but I just want to at least survive here. And my opponent gave me a chance here, taking on e2 first. Knight c3 was a better option, because now I was about to take on a6, and I thought, well, at least I have a pair of bishops, and maybe I could do some tricks and so on. But it turns out just knight a4 back, and look at this bishop on h2. I mean, you can talk all day long that it's a pair of bishops. If you look at this position objectively, it's not a bishop at all. I mean, that is such a painful pawn there on h2. So that would be a horrible experience for me. But my opponent took on e2 first. That gave me the move knight takes e4. And what is very, very good about this move is that in the end of the day, I'm going to have the move f5. And finally, this bishop would feel the fresh air. He would be free out of prison. And that is what this piece deserves. So I was very happy about that. Also, I'm protecting here the b2 pawn. My opponent still could have taken it, but then it's not that simple, at least I thought so. Rook takes b2, for example, queen takes, bishop takes, and then there is still this pawn on d6, which is weak. The computer says it's equal, but from a human point of view, it's not that simple to go for such an endgame, especially knowing that just a few moves back your position was so great as black. Also, f5 is coming, and bishop can take there. So that position I was pretty optimistic about. And my opponent felt the same way, so she played the move rook to e8, but that is a mistake, because now f5, and finally this bishop comes into life, and this rook comes into life too. The f5 pawn is weak, the knight comes back into life as well, knight to c4 protecting and attacking at the same time. I mean, everything is now in my favor, I'm in the driver's seat again, and after knight c5, out of desperation, my opponent wanted to sacrifice the exchange, and I pretty much understand it, because if you take here with a pawn, just look at this horrible, horrible bishop and such a beautiful knight. That is a case where the knight dominates the bishop so much. Also, this pawn along the d-file is going to be a pain in the ass for blacks. Everything is wrong here. So rook e5, that was a very good practical decision, because I was pretty scary. I didn't have a lot of time at this point, and well, if you imagine this queen coming to g3, then the bishop coming to e5, immediately it gets very, very scary. So I played the move queen to d1, I wanted to protect that pawn, and after queen g3, I was preparing the move queen to e1, so it seemed pretty much clever. And in case of rook takes b2, I'm fine with all of the exchanges, and after the rook's exchange, the f5 pawn is hanging, so that felt like a reasonable option for me. Rook f8, now king to h1, that moves just loses the entire advantage in one move. I mean, it was +2 here, and now it's 0-0-0 because my opponent has such a huge initiative here after queen g3, which wasn't reasonable for me at all. Like, my idea was to play queen e1. I'm always happy with the exchange. I thought so, but the computer says, you're so wrong, poor human, because here after queen takes, he claims it's just equal. I mean, how can that be equal? I have an extra exchange here, but it turns out that my king is not really to come out of this prison here once again, and the b pawn is pretty weak. It's so difficult for me to come up with some active ideas, and I have so many weak pawns here. So it didn't really work that way. My opponent didn't really believe, and I would say it's very difficult to believe that this endgame would be good. In this position, you want to maintain the queens on the board, you want to create some checkmating ideas. Exchanging the queens is the last thing you can do. I mean, yes, that is very unexpected for me. Bishop h6, now once again I have +2 here, b3. I started to improve my position step by step, queen to d2, b4. Of course, I want just to exchange as much stuff as possible, especially the queens. That was my dream, so I played rook c1 and then queen to c3. You could see that it's not possible to escape the exchange now, and I feel like king g7 was a very weird move, because the king was pretty secure on g8. So f3, my opponent is trying to create some activity here, rook f2, king to g6, escaping the p, now the queen is free to go, so that is the best moment for me to take. And afterwards, I just play rook c3, defending this key pawn on e3, and I felt like, okay, now it should be definitely winning. I just need to collect all of those pawns, and everything is gonna be fine. But it was still not that clear. f2, now my opponent basically wants to play bishop g3 and once again take this king into prison. So I played the move king to h2, not allowing that, bishop g5, and I even sacrificed the pawn. It felt clever for me, and it is according to the engine, because now I take the c4 pawn, not losing the pawn on e3. Bishop goes to e7, I take another one, and yeah, now it's pretty much clear. I had a few weird moves like rook g4, rook e4 back, but finally I was in total control of the game. My opponent didn't want to resign because, well, the position was so great. I know it for myself. It's so difficult to accept the lose when, well, it felt so great before. So I needed to find a way to give a checkmate. I have pushed, by the way, once again, a very good rule in the endgame: when you have the advantage, if you have the extra pawns, just try to push it as fast as possible. That's gonna create so many difficulties. And of course, play with all of your pieces. Don't forget about any of them. Use your extra material wisely. So bishop c3, rook d5, and now rook to d7 check. My opponent finally resigned because king g7 is just king g6 is just a checkmate in one, and if you go to the back rank, then rook c2 and checkmate is coming. If you try to block it, then also rook d3 is completely winning here. So that was the game. I hope you enjoyed it. That concludes this tournament. I mean, that was such a nightmare for me. The worst tournament of the year, and yeah, I hope it never repeats again, but that is how it happens, at least in my career. I have some very painful events, but then I have the tournaments when I win the entire event. And before this one, I have won 2 tournaments in a row, so probably it should have been that way. And follow closely the updates on the channel, because I'm about to publish the games from the World Chess Championship. I took part in Düsseldorf playing against super GMs like Fabiano Caruana or Nihal Sarin. That was an incredible one-time life experience for me, so I want to share it with you. Stay tuned, and yeah, feel free to subscribe to the channel. That's also very important because it shows that, well, you care about what I'm doing here, that you enjoy the content and you find it useful. Of course, feel free to write in the comments about it. And yeah, somewhere in this video, you're gonna see round number 8, which was a very painful one, but very helpful for you to learn from my mistakes.